episode of the Dr. Perkins podcast. The critical thinking question of the day is, watch the following video on the Shepherdess podcast to be able to answer the following questions. What do you think should happen to Amos Miller? Did his farm products make anyone sick? If so, what germ or germs do you think did it? Was it E. coli, Campylobacter, Listeria, or Salmonella?
The probable cause that Sherry Morris cited as grounds for the search warrant of Miller Organic Farms was number one, a 2016 case of E. coli in Michigan that was tied to a patient who had previously been a customer of Amos Miller's. The second case was what Sherry Morris initially said was a complaint of E. coli out of New York State, but had to correct herself on the witness stand and cite that it was not a complaint, but rather a report, and that the patient did not want to offer any comments. Under Sherry Morris' oversight, the lab testing for the 33 samples that were collected from Miller's Organic Farms took place. The samples were tested for E. coli, Campylobacter, Salmonella, and Listeria. Remember that 2 cases of E. coli being the probable cause on which the search warrant was issued. The lab report returned no positive for E. coli, Campylobacter, or Salmonella. However, traces of Listeria were found in 8 of 33 samples. Robert Barnes began to question Sherry Morris, and as a reminder, the dialogue is not verbatim, but a summation from my short notes. Barnes asked, "Did the testing you performed on the dairy samples taken from Miller's Organic Farms return positive for E. coli?" Sherry Morris responded, "The tests did not come back positive." Robert Barnes asked, "Did the testing you performed on the dairy samples taken from Miller's Organic Farms return negative for E. coli?" Sherry Morris responded, "The tests were not positive, but they were not negative either. The results were inconclusive, but inconclusive does not mean negative." At that point in time, the courtroom filled with a faint murmuring of laughter from the audience. Robert Barnes asked, "Did you have these test results before January 24th? As a side note, January 24th was when the PDA officially sued Miller Organic Farms and put an injunction on his whole dairy operation. Sherry Morris responded, "There was no positive test result for E. coli, neither were they negative. There were only inconclusive results." Robert Barnes asks, "Has any customer of Miller's or any resident of Pennsylvania filed a complaint that they were ever injured or made ill by Amos Miller's food?" Sherry Morris responded, "No." There were 2 more witnesses for the PDA, but it generally followed the same course. However, every witness was asked by Robert Barnes before leaving the stand, "Have any of Miller's members or any resident of Pennsylvania ever filed a complaint that they were injured or made ill by Miller's food?" And every time the answer was no. After the PDA witnesses were finished, it was Barnes' turn to bring forward his witnesses on Miller's behalf, and he brought forth around 10. A majority of them were customers of Miller's who testified to the health benefits and safety of his food. But one of the expert witnesses brought forth by Miller's defense was Margaret Coleman, a medical microbiologist who formerly worked with the USDA. Now, Coleman is currently a bacteriologist and an expert in risk analysis for public health. Margaret Coleman independently reviewed the lab results on the 33 samples collected from Miller's Organic Farms. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to this next portion. 8 of the 33 samples from Miller's Organic Farms contained traces of Listeria according to the PDA's lab results. However, bacteriologist Margaret Coleman brought something to light with respect to the nature of Listeria. She cited that when it comes to Listeria, it is the quantity of microorganisms that typically leads to infection, not the presence of the bacteria alone. Coleman cited that according to a USDA study in 2003, typically no illness results until 10,000 Listeria organisms are present, with Canada citing up to a 100,000 microorganism limit. Barnes asked Coleman how many Listeria microorganisms were cited on the lab report from samples obtained from Miller's Organic Farms. The PDA attorney immediately shouted, "Objection, no evidence present." The judge sustained that objection, and Robert Barnes responded, "No evidence provided."
Feel free to take a pause for some critical thinking. Once you think you know the answer, hit the play button, and I will tell you what I think is going on. So the Shepherdess, she did a wonderful job at presenting lots of facts and figures about what was going on here. She's even had follow-up videos where she talks to his attorney, doing some more research into this case. It really is kind of wild right here. So Amos Miller, he's been serving his customers for 25 years with no FDA recalls or complaints. Tyson Chicken, which is a huge supplier of chicken in America, they have not gone 25 years without a complaint. That being said, his operation is a lot smaller than Tyson's, but still, that's an amazing track record right there. 25 years with no recalls or complaints. Well, how many customers does he have? Well, he has about 4,000 customers at present. That's with this crazy lawsuit going on and everything else. But he says that he's dealt with 10,000 unique individuals over the course of his career. But even if you just say 4,000 is roughly his customer base over that 25 years, 4,000 times 25, that's 100,000 customer contacts years right there. And the reason why I bring this up is they say that for every 100,000 customer years you got, you would expect basically 26 food-related deaths or hospitalizations per year. That's not over the course of his career, that's every single year, right? I might like Amos Miller, but if I'm dying in the hospital, if I'm sick and I'm in the hospital, I'm going to report the guy, right? Unless I had no clue that it was his food that did it. But, the fact that he's been able to operate 25 years without anybody complaining about him, without anybody reporting him to the FDA, that's pretty powerful right there. I don't think it's people, well, I like him, so even though I'm dying and I'm in the hospital, I'm not going to report him. No, hospitals aren't cheap, right? You need some way to pay bills. So that really is quite the accomplishment there. Over the course of his career, you would have expected 650 hospitalizations and or deaths right there. Now, you'd expect 15 cases of Salmonella, 12 cases of Campylobacter, 3 cases of E. coli, and 1 case of Listeria. So let's dive into some of the facts about the Listeria in this case. So, it's looking like there's 2 cases of Listeria, which is more than what you'd expect based off of an operation his size. That being said, let's go into the details of these. So, one of the cases, it didn't even have any further details. So, we really can't do anything with that, unfortunately. Now, the other one that you got is it was a woman with advanced cancer who had never drank Miller's raw milk. Well, if she's not buying the food that's contaminated, she's not gonna get it. One thing is Listeria, it can have an incubation period of up to 70 days. And so you drank the raw milk and you got sick up to 70 days later. Well, that could even happen in this case because she never drank his milk. So really, that's not a very strong case there. Right there, just kind of focusing on that other case. Okay, 8 out of the 33 samples they took from his building had Listeria. Now, Listeria, we have a threshold of detection of 1 colony-forming unit per 10 to 25 grams of cheese or 10 to 25 milliliters of milk. What does that mean? You might have Listeria in this milk or cheese, but it's not going to show up if you have less than 1 colony-forming unit per 10 grams of 10 to 25 grams of cheese or 10 to 25 milliliters of milk. Well, that's great, but how many colony-forming units do you have to get in order to get sick? Well, they're saying anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 colony forming units. All right, and as I said before, if you get sick, it can take up to 70 days, usually within a month, but it could take up to 70 days. And if you do get sick, if you have listeriosis, you have a 95% hospitalization rate and a 17% death rate. Well, let's put this into context. Take this number of 95% hospitalization with a grain of salt. Here's why. Let's talk about a really serious disease that's a little bit off topic, but tuberculosis, right? Without treatment, with current treatment, you have a 10% chance of dying from tuberculosis. That's pretty bad. But here's the thing. Not everybody that gets tuberculosis gets sick, right? 90% of the time you get tuberculosis, you didn't even know that you had it, right? And so you'll die of something totally unrelated, never knowing that you had tuberculosis, right? If you're a nurse or a doctor or somebody that works in the healthcare industry, you'll get, when they do a PPD on you, you'll notice that you'll get like a rash on that PPD, or your quantiferin gold will pop positive. But that's all the more problem it's going to give you, right? And that's 90% of TB cases. So when you factor those 90% TB cases in, out of nowhere, the TB death rate in a treated person goes from 10% to 1%. Why? Because most people don't even know they ever had it. So putting those same sort of logic over here with the listeriosis, you know, that's only people, that's like the very, very tip of the iceberg. Most people that get listeria never even know they have it, so they're not going to be hospitalized, and they're not going to have the 17% death rate, right? Now, if you've eaten a bunch of, if you've eaten a bunch of food and stuff like that, and it's very contaminated for listeria, I'm not saying go sit at home. Well, no, you need to go to the doctor if you're feeling ill. Here's some of the problem with listeria. So it can replicate, it can make a copy of itself every 35 hours. And so the customer might have gotten food that was safe, but they allowed it to spoil in their fridge. And so now this food is unsafe. And listeria can make copies of itself even if it's pretty cold in your refrigerator, right? We're talking about 4 degrees Celsius, and that's 40 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So you got your refrigerator working just fine, and yet your milk is going bad inside the fridge. All right, that could be another point in his favor. Okay, so what are other possible ways that this listeria came about in his patients? Well, listeria is everywhere in the environment. Food, soil, vegetables. It can get on your silverware and form biofilms. And biofilms, think of these as kind of like bomb shelters. So if we were to be attacked with a nuclear weapon, everybody that's out and about, shopping or in the open would be fried. But people that were in their bomb shelters would be fine, right? So they would wait till the radiation, the poisonous gas, whatever, went away, and then they could come out from the bomb shelters and they'd be just fine. Well, that biofilm works the same way. And so you can put bleach or whatever on that knife, on your silverware, but if you're not getting rid of that biofilm, once that bleach or cleaning agent's gone, the germs can start growing again and spread and infect everything. And so, yeah, that's a major issue here. And that can also serve as a way to contaminate other foods. Now, 5% of people have listeria right now in their gut. And so they can give that to somebody else. Now, let's talk about listeria outbreaks. 95% of listeria outbreaks are in lunch meat and in ready-to-eat salads, right? 1% of listeria outbreaks are in soft cheeses. And so one of the things is it's 95% more likely, 95 times, more likely that these people that got listeria, that just so happened to be a customer of his, got it from, got it from deli meat and ready-to-eat salads than they got it from his cheese, more likely than not. And the other thing you have to consider, even with his positive, well, look, we found Listeria on his farm. Okay, but here's something to consider. What about a false positive? Oh, the PA Department of Agriculture knows what they're doing. They wouldn't mess that up. Okay, well, they might be very competent at their jobs, wonderful people, but here's the thing. You're in the hospital, you're dying from who knows what, they get a blood culture on you. Well, here's the thing about blood cultures. 40% of the time, so 40 out of 100 positive blood cultures, you're not sick with that bug, right? Your blood that came out of your arm did not have that bug in it. But through the collection process, we accidentally put that bug into your blood. And so now your blood is going to test positive for staph or whatever, right? And so one of the things I'm wondering is, given that it's so ridiculously common in the environment and that it likes to form biofilms, how do we know that something like that didn't happen to the FDA or the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, where they got good clean milk and accidentally contaminated it with their collection process, and now they got false positives. So I don't know. I don't know. I could not say 100% with 100% certainty that Amos Miller caused this food poisoning in these two cases. Given all the facts, number one, Salmonella is 60 times more common than Listeria. Campylobacter is 48 times more common than Listeria. E. coli is 12 times more common than Listeria. And yet, we didn't get any cases of those from this guy. So, if his process is so terrible that we got people that are dying of Listeria, we got 2 cases out of 100,000 customer years. And even that number doesn't seem to be that big of a number. But, we'll just take it as the gospel truth. Why aren't we seeing all these other cases? If anything, it seems like he has a very clean process. That's a long time to go without any sort of customer complaints. And so, unless I saw some very powerful evidence to say otherwise, I would definitely say not guilty. Now, I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your doctor. You're going to have to make these decisions for yourself. But, just personally, with my opinion, I would say the guy's not guilty. So let's look at those other organisms. So the test for all those other organisms came back either negative or failed to pop positive. So, really, you getting infected from those other food products or other organisms as food, very unlikely. So, as I said, do I think his food caused these food-related illnesses? Probably not. Once again, though, I'm not your doctor, and I'm not a lawyer or a judge, and so that will be something you have to decide for yourself. Alright, that concludes today's episode. If you liked what you heard, be sure to click the subscribe and like button down below. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or if there's any particular topic you'd like me to create a video on, let me know in the comments down below. Alright, well, I look forward to seeing you on my next podcast.